The Sunday lunch in Zara's new home smelled of roast and spice and sounded like easy laughter, until a plastic container slipped from her hands and clattered on the table. Inside were neat stacks of invoices and envelopes fat with cash, the sort of thing you hide, not serve. The contractor at the head of the table froze, eyes darting from the papers to Baraka, who laughed too loud and tried to claim they were old receipts. The contractor, pale and shaking, pulled out his phone and recorded Baraka saying things that sounded like deals, names and amounts muttered between bites. The clip was short, raw and impossible to ignore. By the time the plates were cleared, someone's cousin had already uploaded it and the room filled with the electric sting of a phone buzzing. Zara watched the video spread like wildfire, watched strangers add their anger and disbelief, watched a pile of carefully built respect crumble under a single clip. Her world split in two. On one side was the husband she married for status and the quiet promise of safety. On the other side was truth, the contractor's trembling voice, the envelopes that could not be unseen. She thought of reporters who could take the clip public and of what that would mean for Baraka, for the family, for her own name. She thought of the children who might hear about this on the radio. Her fingers closed around the phone. It felt heavier than any ring. For a moment she simply listened to the room, to the clock, to the distant hum of a viral world deciding what justice looked like. McKenna's house buzzed with polite chatter and the smell of fresh pastries as she carefully set the table for what was supposed to be a peaceful reconciliation brunch. Her husband, a newly elected politician, smiled nervously at his old constituents, hoping this meal would smooth over months of tension. Behind the scenes, his aide moved quickly, shoving a small USB drive into a dessert plate, intending to hide it until later. But the aide's hands trembled, the plates shifted, and the wrong dessert ended up in the hands of the town priest, a respected man known for his calm and measured voice. He smiled politely, thinking nothing of it, and soon, wanting to share a hymn with the congregation, he plugged the USB into his laptop, expecting only notes and songs. Instead, the screen lit up with rows of bank transfers, videos of bribes being handed over, and conversations that tied McKenna's husband directly to payoffs and corrupt deals. Gasps echoed through the brunch hall. The priest froze, unsure whether to stop or let everyone see. Then one of the young parishioners whispered, and someone else took out a phone. Within minutes, footage of the shocking revelation was online, shared across WhatsApp groups, social media feeds, and even news channels. The brunch erupted in confusion, some guests shouted, some ran for cameras, and others just stared at the screen, unable to believe what they were seeing. McKenna's heart pounded. She watched the room transform from polite smiles to chaos as neighbors and constituents started chanting for answers, waving phones, demanding accountability. Her husband tried to calm people, but every word seemed to fuel the anger. The videos, the transfers, the hidden evidence, they were undeniable. By the time the last dessert plate was cleared, the brunch had become the spark for an instant protest that spread through the town like wildfire. People lined the streets, shouting slogans, waving banners, recording everything for online streams. McKenna held her head in her hands, realizing that a single, simple mistake, the wrong dessert plate, had torn open a world of secrets. What had been meant as a gentle, reconciliatory meal had exploded into public outrage, proving that even small slips could expose hidden corruption and change a town forever. The USB drive, still plugged into the laptop, glowed under the stunned eyes of everyone, marking the day no one in Luro would ever forget. Ao had spent the whole morning arranging flowers, polishing silverware, and rehearsing polite smiles for the Sunday meal meant to introduce her to Baraka's party elders. She wanted everything to look perfect, platters of roasted meats, bowls of fresh salad, and desserts carefully stacked on fine china. Her longtime friend, the house cook, moved quietly in the kitchen, chopping and stirring, offering advice and small jokes to keep the atmosphere light. As the meal progressed, laughter filled the dining room, elders complimented the food, and Ao felt a warm glow of belonging. But then, as the cook reached for a chilled jar tucked behind the counter, his eyes widened. The label was familiar, it belonged to a shell company linked to Baraka, the very MP hosting the event. He froze for a second, then quietly lifted his phone and began live streaming, angling the camera so that only the jar and the labels were clearly visible, careful not to disrupt the meal. In the dining room, Ao noticed nothing, smiling and nodding at the elder's stories, unaware that the camera was already capturing evidence that could unravel years of careful planning. By the time the main course was served, the cook's live stream had already begun to spread online. Within hours, viewers across the country were sharing, commenting, and tagging news outlets. Screenshots of the jar, the labels, and the subtle hints of financial wrongdoing flooded social media feeds. Donors who had once lined up to support Baraka's campaign started pulling back, their emails and calls revealing shock and disapproval. The elders, too, began whispering among themselves, a ripple of suspicion spreading through the banquet like wildfire. Ao, still smiling at the table, only noticed the change in atmosphere when the laughter faded into tense murmurs and phones emerged from pockets, screens flashing. Baraka's confident grin faltered as he caught sight of the growing storm. By evening, headlines carried the clip far beyond Salima, and the MP's carefully built public image began to crumble under the weight of exposure. The cook, quietly proud, slipped out of the kitchen, leaving Ao to realize that what had started as a warm, polite Sunday introduction had turned into a viral scandal. Every dish, every smile, every polite toast became a backdrop to a revelation that no one at the table would soon forget, and the city buzzed with the sudden collapse of a politician's world. Lindy had spent the early morning stirring a big pot of her famous Sunday stew, the kind that filled the kitchen with rich, savory smells and drew neighbors in with just one whiff. Today was special. She wanted her husband's grassroots supporters to feel welcome, to see the warmth and simplicity of a home that cared about the people, not just politics. The small dining hall slowly filled with guests, men and women she knew from markets, streets, and community meetings, all smiling politely and greeting her husband, who looked uncomfortable in his ceremonial robe, stiff from pride and expectation. As Lindy adjusted the tablecloth, something caught her eye. A faint outline stitched into the hem of the robe looked odd. Curious, she slipped her fingers under the fabric and discovered a thick envelope sewn carefully inside. Her stomach sank, and anger flared hot and sudden. She opened it quickly. Inside were crisp stacks of cash, each bill marked with codes, and a folded note listing delivery times, proof of bribery, campaign manipulation, and secret deals. Without thinking, she grabbed the envelope and emptied its contents straight into the serving bowl of stew. The room quieted for a heartbeat as she stirred the money in with the ladle, then quickly set the bowl on the center of the table as if nothing had happened. Guests hesitated, confused by the strange movement, until one of them, a sharp-eyed local journalist, noticed the cash. He pulled out his phone and snapped several photos, capturing every detail of the marked bills and the note. Within minutes, the images were online, shared through messaging apps and social media, spreading like wildfire. People who had been quietly suspicious now had proof in front of them. Baraka's face turned pale as he realized the gravity of the exposure, but it was too late. The journalist had already tagged the local police and news outlets. By mid-afternoon, authorities arrived at the campaign office, armed with the photos and evidence, conducting a raid that left staff scrambling and ledgers open on desks. Lindy stood at the edge of the room, heart still racing, watching supporters whisper and shake their heads, some angry, some amazed. Her simple stew had become a symbol, not just of hospitality, but of exposure and truth. What started as a humble Sunday meal had turned into a turning point, a viral revelation that no one in Mansa would forget. The quiet journalist's photos, her sudden act of courage, and the evidence hidden in a robe had toppled the carefully managed facade of power, proving that even the smallest, simplest moments could ignite the largest consequences. By evening, the story had traveled far beyond the town, and Lindy, still cleaning the last dishes, realized how a single act of boldness could change everything. Nora's courtyard was alive with chatter and the comforting smell of simmering porridge as she welcomed the entire ward for Sunday breakfast. Bowls of steaming millet porridge, sweetened with honey and dotted with roasted peanuts, were ladled out to everyone who came, from the elderly women who sat on the benches to the children who ran between legs, laughing. She wanted the meal to feel warm, inclusive, a simple act of charity that would lift spirits and show that her family cared. Her husband, a well-known MP, mingled awkwardly, smiling at constituents and nodding to neighbors, while his aides bustled quietly around, refilling bowls and serving tea. One aide, however, had clearly had one too many drinks the night before. Between mouthfuls of porridge and sips of water, he muttered something strange, almost under his breath, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. He called the MP's offshore accounts by a nickname no one outside the inner circle was supposed to know, joking about them as if the truth were just a funny story. A young activist sitting near the table perked up instantly. He pulled out his phone and started recording the aide's words, capturing the slip in perfect clarity. The recording was brief, but it carried everything: the nickname, the implication, the casual way the aide had let the secret slip. Without hesitation, the activist uploaded the clip to an opposition WhatsApp group. Phones buzzed almost immediately, and the audio began spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. By mid-afternoon, neighbors were sharing the clip, tagging friends, posting snippets on social media. The small courtyard breakfast had turned into a stage for a viral scandal. Radio stations picked up the story, broadcasting the aide's muttered confession alongside commentary about offshore accounts and alleged corruption. By evening, the MP was no longer just a smiling figure in Nora's courtyard, he was facing scrutiny on national radio, with journalists and citizens demanding answers. The clip sparked outrage, forcing the capital's political machinery into motion. Within days, the politician was summoned for corruption hearings, leaving his carefully managed image in tatters. Nora, who had only wanted a simple, charitable meal to bring the community together, watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of shock and disbelief. A single careless word, a moment of drunken carelessness, had sparked a storm that swept from the small streets of Dara all the way to the national spotlight. By the time the porridge bowls were empty, the ward had unknowingly witnessed the first domino fall in a scandal that no one would forget, and Nora realized just how powerful small, everyday gatherings could become when secrets were accidentally revealed. Kemi had spent the morning arranging the dining hall, carefully laying out plates, glasses, and napkins for the Sunday feast meant to welcome her husband's supporters. The air smelled of roasted meat, fresh bread, and spiced vegetables, a comforting mix that drew the guests into conversation as they settled at the long table. Her husband's new driver hovered near the kitchen doorway, fidgeting and glancing around nervously. Kemi noticed him slipping small, sealed packets into his pockets, his hands shaking slightly. Something about the way he moved set off alarms in her mind. Quietly, without drawing attention, she waited for the right moment. When the guests were distracted by the first course, she slipped over to the side, took the packets from the driver's pocket, and carefully placed them onto her husband's plate, hidden beneath a napkin. She returned to her seat as if nothing had happened, her heart racing. The meal continued smoothly until one of the rival councillors, curious and hungry, helped himself to a portion from the MP's plate. Almost immediately, he started coughing violently, waving his hands and spitting into a napkin. The MP lunged toward the plate, grabbing it aggressively, his face turning red as panic and fear replaced his usual composure. Unbeknownst to him, the whole scene was being captured by a guest's phone. Laughter turned into shocked murmurs as the guests realized something was terribly wrong. Phones were raised, videos were taken, and whispers spread like wildfire through the hall. The panic, the grabbing, and the frantic movement created a moment that looked undeniable on camera. The next day, investigators reviewing CCTV footage of the event noticed something unusual. Packets had come from the MP's car, which had been parked with a clear view of the cameras. Inside, printouts of bank transfers, courier notes, and evidence of a laundering ring were found, tying the MP directly to illegal money movement. The footage from the dining hall, combined with the documents in the car, exposed a network of corruption that had remained hidden for years. Kemi sat quietly as news crews arrived, realizing that her quick thinking and attention to detail had revealed a scandal that no one had expected to surface at a simple Sunday meal. What had begun as a warm, inviting feast had turned into a viral story, shared widely on social media, with every shocking movement replayed over and over. Her husband's reputation, carefully maintained through charm and connections, collapsed almost overnight. The packets, the cough, the panicked grab, every small moment had built up into proof of a laundering ring, showing that even the smallest act of vigilance could bring the biggest secrets into the light. By the evening, Obairi was buzzing with the story, and Kemi knew the simple Sunday feast would be remembered as the day the MP's hidden world was exposed for all to see. Fatou had spent the entire morning carefully preparing for the Sunday ceremony. The dining hall gleamed, flowers were arranged in neat bouquets, and every plate and glass was perfectly set. She moved with quiet precision, making sure the guests felt welcomed while keeping an eye on her plan. Today was not just any meal, she had arranged everything so that her husband, Baraka, would sit directly across from the finance minister. This was no coincidence, Fatou wanted the minister to see exactly what she had prepared. As the guests arrived, laughter and polite greetings filled the room, but beneath the calm, tension simmered. Fatou carried a specially prepared dish from the kitchen, a savory casserole that smelled rich and comforting. Hidden inside the folded layers of the meal was a single, small receipt. No one noticed it at first. As the dish reached the table, she placed it carefully in front of her husband, ensuring that the finance minister could see every detail as it was served. When the minister took the first bite, his eyes caught the folded paper. He unfolded it cautiously, curiosity written across his face. Then, as he read the names aloud, the room fell silent. Suppliers who had secretly funneled money to Baraka were listed clearly on the receipt. Shock rippled through the table. Phones immediately came out as one of the guests started live-streaming the ceremony, broadcasting the revelation to the world in real time. Within minutes, viewers on social media were sharing the clip, and news outlets began covering the unfolding scandal. The finance minister's stunned expressions, Baraka's sudden shift from confidence to panic, and the receipt itself became the focus of national attention. People reacted with outrage, posting comments and calling for accountability. The viral video sparked debates, discussions, and even protest messages online. By afternoon, officials confirmed that an ethics probe had been launched into Baraka's dealings, with investigators demanding explanations from him and the listed suppliers. The carefully staged Sunday ceremony, meant to appear as a routine social event, had turned into a public exposure that left the politicians scrambling for answers. Fatou, calm and collected, watched as her plan unfolded perfectly. Every detail, from the seating arrangement to the hidden receipt, worked to reveal the truth. By the evening, the footage had reached millions, and the story dominated news feeds. What started as a simple ceremonial meal had become a turning point, showing how one well-planned act could expose corruption and trigger immediate action. Fatou's quiet courage and precise planning had created a moment that no one at the table, or in the country, would soon forget. The viral video became proof that even the most controlled appearances could be shattered with careful observation and bold action. Amira had spent weeks planning the Sunday lunch, but not for the usual reason of charm or social appearances. She was tired of living in the shadow of her husband, a well-known MP, and she had decided it was time to turn the tables. The house was perfectly arranged, sunlight streaming through the windows onto polished tables set with fine china and silverware. She had invited friends, neighbors, and family, but hidden among the guests was someone no one suspected, a popular talk show host, disguised as a distant cousin. The conversation flowed naturally at first, with laughter, small talk, and polite compliments exchanged across the table. The MP, confident and unaware, leaned back in his chair, enjoying the attention and praise from his guests. Then, midway through the meal, Amira gave a subtle nod. The host reached into a folder and revealed a detailed dossier. WhatsApp messages, courier slips, and documents tied directly to the MP's vote-selling scheme were laid out for everyone to see. The host explained the evidence calmly but clearly, pointing out how the scheme worked and who had been involved. Cameras caught every expression, the shock, the panic, and the humiliation of the MP, and the entire moment was broadcast live to thousands watching online. Phones buzzed, notifications exploded, and within hours the story went viral. The politician's campaign collapsed almost immediately, officials began resigning under pressure, and Ameera, once seen only as a trophy wife, became the unlikely hero of a scandal that captivated the nation. People shared clips, commented on social media, and praised her courage for exposing corruption from right under the politician's nose. The simple Sunday lunch had turned into a masterclass in public exposure, showing how careful planning, courage, and timing could turn a private moment into a viral moment that no one could ignore. Ameera's quiet defiance and smart strategy ensured that the story would be remembered far beyond the lunch itself, making her an unexpected but unforgettable figure in the unfolding scandal.